It's a pleasure to have our friend, outstanding attorney Sidney Powell with us. Sidney, how are you?
Great, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. I want you to give us an update on what's going on with the Lieutenant General Michel Flynn case.
We have moved to withdraw his plea of guilty based on the government's what amounts to a breach of contract. They changed their position, wanted to withdraw and have withdrawn their recommendation that he receive probation. They've advocated that he be put in prison, and they have generally reneged on the plea agreement despite his continued cooperation and willingness to cooperate further in their case against his former business partner in the Eastern District of Virginia, that they got a jury verdict in last summer, but the judge threw it out because it was a insufficient case, to put it mildly. That's the polite way of putting it. And now we have also motions due in Judge Sullivan's court again by Friday. And we filed today a corrected version of a supplement to a motion we filed last week to explain that Mr. Van Grack, the prosecutor who was in this case and also driving the Eastern District of Virginia case against a former business partner, had actually sought to suborn Mr. Flynn's perjury in that case and effectively tried to get him to make a false statement punishable by 5 years in prison under 1001, and he knew that's exactly what he was doing because he had edited language out of the plea statement of offense more than a year earlier that would have said that Mr. Flynn admitted filing a FARA statement knowing it contained false statements, when Mr. Flynn had denied that and wouldn't sign that, and Mr. Van Grack agreed and edited that language out of it, then tried to get Mr. Flynn in the last summer to say that he did know there were false statements in the FARA filing, even though he knew he did not. And we also found an FBI 302 interview form of that witness, the Covington lawyer who had represented Mr. Flynn before, saying that Mr. Flynn had the completely undercutting what the government wanted Mr. Flynn to say.
Now, let me try and unravel some of this.
Yeah.
By the way, what has the judge's reaction been so far? Has he been quiet,
he
tolerant? What?
Motion. No, he completely slammed and denied in a 92-page decision our Brady motion. We still can't get the original FBI 302 in this case. And now I've found a witness who says he saw the original 302, and it said Mr. Flynn was honest with the FBI agents. He didn't lie, and that can be the only reason it's missing. Somebody edited that out to get to the next draft, and they've deep-sixed it.
Well, he wrote a 92-page opinion. That's a long opinion.
It is a very long opinion, denying absolutely everything we asked for every reason he could think of. He denied us the original 302. He denied us a statement we know exists in the Department of Justice exonerating Mr. Flynn of being an agent of Russia.
Now, why would this judge do this? I mean, if he's going to be partisan, he really ought to recuse himself.
Yeah, I don't know why he did it. He said he did it according to the law, but you and I both know that Brady requires the government to produce all evidence that favors the defense, and on top of that, he's the judge who enters a standing Brady order requiring it to be produced. But he essentially said because Mr. Flynn was never indicted, he pled guilty pursuant to a very rushed plea agreement. He bought the government's argument that they had no duty to produce Brady before he was indicted, and he had no duty to produce it after he entered his plea of guilty, so there was generally never a duty to produce it, even though they knew Mr. Flynn was innocent.
Now, you have to wait for all this to be completed before you can seek an appeal. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
I just want the audience to understand how this works. You can't take these issues up and down and up. Go ahead.
Right. You have to wait until he's sentenced to prison before we can appeal anything, if they're ridiculous enough to go that far after our new motions that we're filing next week or our supplemental brief on the withdrawal, because we've got reasons, stunning reasons to withdraw this guilty plea.
This prosecution is being handled at a what office?
Out of the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Jesse Liu, the same one who let off the Awan brothers and Mr. Wolf with a slap on the wrist.
Mm-hmm. And
Brandon Van Grack is leading the prosecution, and of course he was on Mueller's special counsel operation working under Andrew Weissman, and is what I would call a Weissman wannabe.
But ultimately, the U.S. Attorney's Office reports to the Attorney General of the United States.
Yes, and is nominated and put in that position by the president, who can fire them at will.
But, I mean, the president isn't going to interfere and fire the U.S. Attorney at will over something like this. I can't think of a single president who would do this. However, he does have a chain of hierarchy. That chain of hierarchy goes to the Office of the U.S. Attorneys at the Justice Department. It goes to the Criminal Division. It goes up to the Deputy Attorney General of the United States and to the Attorney General of the United States, correct?
And yes, and Mr. Van Grack works in the FARA division of the National Security Division, I believe, of DOJ.
So I assume they're aware of this case. You've gotten a lot of publicity, right?
Well, they ought to be aware of my filing today that explains how Mr. Van Grack attempted to suborn perjury and procure a false statement from Mr. Flynn while he held evidence to the contrary in an FBI 302 of the Covington lawyers. And
how is
himself had made to the plea agreement.
Well, you really are caught in a Kafkaesque situation, aren't you?
It's unbelievable, Mark. I have never seen such a travesty of justice in my entire multi-decade law practice and 500 federal appeals.
Are you being treated, I want to ask these questions, but I don't want you to get in trouble with the judge. Are you being treated with respect? Is your client being treated with respect in the courtroom?
The respect in the courtroom has been just fine. Judge Sullivan has been very pleasant in the courtroom. In fact, ironically, he's the judicial hero of my book, License to Lie, Exposing Corruption in the Department of Justice, that you and I talked about on one of your Sunday specials several months ago. And I've bragged on him for 5 or 6 years for his tough stand against the government on Brady issues.
And he opened up that whole Ted Stevens affair.
He did, and threw it out. And this case is far worse than that one, far worse. But according to his 92-page opinion, the difference there was that the Department of Justice admitted it was Brady and asked for the case to be thrown out. Well, if we're going to wait for the Department of Justice to admit it's Brady, we got a problem.
What's confounding me, though, is you have new leadership at the Department of Justice, and they're not really intervening in this.
Well, they might sit up and take note after yesterday and today's filings, because that's the most plain it's been. We attached the redlined version of the statement of offense that Mr. Van Grack himself edited with the email showing that he had transmitted that to Covington, and it makes it crystal clear, then juxtaposed with what happened last summer in the Eastern District of Virginia, that everything since then by Mr. Van Grack and the prosecutors in this case has been retaliatory against Mr. Flynn.
So they basically, for the public, they tried to set up Flynn.
Yep.
They withheld information from Flynn.
Exactly, that was favorable to his defense and showed he was innocent.
And now they're trying to punish him because he's fighting back through you.
And because he wouldn't lie last summer in the Rafikian case.
Now, financially, I assume the man is still impoverished. Is that correct?
We are working from the MikeFlynnDefenseFund.org. All the lawyers have cut their rates dramatically. I'm working for about what Covington bills its librarian for. And everybody else is working at a lower rate than that. And we are doing everything we humanly can, and the American public has been incredibly generous. Most of our contributions are under $100. People are donating. People on Social Security, patriots on Social Security, are donating $50 a month.
A couple of years ago, we did a Levin surge, and let's do at least a mini Levin surge. Now, it's the MikeFlynnDefenseFund.org. Is that what you said?
That's what it is, yes.
Mr. Producer, let's put those up on the social sites. And I want to strongly encourage you folks Every little bit helps. The Mike Flynn needs money for his defense, and look what he's up against. He's up against the full power of this, what is this this continuing outrage against an American hero, and he is an American hero. MikeFlynnDefenseFund.org, MikeFlynnDefenseFund.org. No patriot, no hero should be treated this way. Just a small donation, if you can do that, so he can continue his fight against what's taking place here, because he's really fighting for us, isn't he? And aren't you?
He really is. Every American should be terrified by what we are seeing in this case. Mm-hmm. It can happen to anyone that they want to target and destroy.
MikeFlynnDefenseFund.org, Levinites, please. Please help us. Mike Flynn, Flynn, MikeFlynnDefenseFund.org. Okay, Sidney, go get him. We'll do our best.
We'll do it. Thank you so much, Mark. And we're not going to quit until we win, and I'm going to expose every bit of it. Friday next week is going to be phenomenal. It's going to be epic.
Well, we're going to be observing, and hopefully we'll report on that too. And thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, folks, please. We don't do this often. We can't leave this general on the battlefield alone. Comey tried to take him out on day one. They threatened to charge his son, for God's sakes. They set him up. They've tried to set him up again. He has resisted them. So basically, they said he wasn't cooperating. We want him to serve a period of time in prison. I think it was half a year or so. He's been in prison. Look at him. Look what they're doing to him. We got to do more than shake our heads and wag our fingers. So if you can help, and most of you can help with something, it's MikeFlynnDefenseFund.org, MikeFlynnDefenseFund.org. It's on Mark Levin Show Facebook, Mark Levin Show Twitter. We don't do this often, but I want to call for an official Levin surge, where the patriotic Levinites en masse are moved to action. We've done this to block amnesty. We've done it for other occasions, to help elect Ted Cruz, to help elect Mike Lee, to help elect Marco Rubio, others, and for causes that are dear to us. So this is an official Levin surge by patriotic Levinites like you, to please jump in and help. MikeFlynnDefenseFund.org. I'll be right back.